Today, I have the great pleasure to sit down with a woman who has a passion to normalize sobriety and help people believe in the possibility of a sober life. Meet Leigh from the Instagram account Macros and Mocktails, an account that was launched in June of 2023. Leigh started to vulnerably share about her struggle with alcohol, empathetically and with humor. Today, almost a year later, she has over 33,000 followers who sign in on a daily basis to get insights on how to live sober. Leigh became sober curious in 2017, and it took her 6 years and hundreds of day ones for sobriety to finally stick. She claims she didn't have a rock bottom, but plenty of rocky moments that served as red flags. Her motto is drinking is not an option. Leigh spent her professional career in public relations and currently manages social media for 3 women-owned wellness brands. She resides in Portland, Oregon, with her husband and 3 teenage sons. Lean in today to hear how she began her journey publicly for year 1 in sobriety and how it took hold and kept her accountable as she learned how to walk her new way. Welcome to the Sober Living Stories podcast. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of sobriety. We shine a spotlight on individuals who have faced the challenges of alcoholism and addiction and are today living out their best lives sober. Each guest has experienced incredible transformation and are here to share their story with you. I'm Jessica Stipanovic, your host. Join me each week as guests from all walks of life share their stories to inspire and provide hope to those who need it most.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here.
Your passion for normalizing sobriety and an alcohol-free lifestyle is to be commended. It's something that I don't think anyone should be ashamed of, but so often are, and you're helping to kind of break that stereotype. So I'm happy to have you here today. If you wouldn't mind just sharing your personal story as far back as you'd like to go, just taking us up to the present day.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I appreciate your comment on the vulnerability piece of my content, because in the beginning, I played it safer, and it was reaching people, but not to the level of really sharing my personal stories did, because I think we all need to see ourselves in someone else's story. We need to feel less alone on this journey. We need to relate to other people. We need to know we're not the only one. And so that's really what sparked the vulnerable sharing. And as I told you before, we hit record, I think the more that I share, really, the more shame I release around this whole journey. So it helps me to help other people. People say, thank you, you've been such a help. And it's like, well, what I'm giving, I get back, tenfold. So it's really amazing, this whole journey. And like you said, I'm relatively new to being sober. Still real. I think, the first year is still new sobriety. I consider myself newly sober, but it's really been a journey that started back in 2017. My dad passed in 2014. I was with him when he passed away. It was very unexpected. And I think there was a noticeable shift at that point in my drinking. And I would say I drank normally, if there is such a thing as normal drinking, really up until that point. I would have a bottle of wine over the course of 3 nights, 1 large glass. For the most part, especially when my kids were younger. Sometimes, I wouldn't drink at all because I had 3 kids, 3 and under, and that lifestyle doesn't lend to drinking, really. It wasn't until they were toddlers and moving around a bit and on a more consistent sleep schedule. And then my dad passed away, and I think it was just a perfect storm of I was drinking to cope with grief.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 2017, there were a few moments where I had blacked out. I had said things to my kids that I shouldn't have said. They remembered the next day. My oldest son told me I was drunk. And so, things you don't want to hear from your kids, right? And so in 2017, that's when I'm like, I found the book by Sarah Hepola called Blackout. I don't know how I stumbled across it. Amazing read. Didn't want to be done with it. I remember I was reading it over Labor Day weekend, poolside. And on the way home, we were on a trip. And on the way home from that trip, I told my whole family, I said, I told them I was going to take a 50-day break from alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
This was negatively impacting my life, negatively impacting our lives. I recognized it. I was going to take a break. But in my head, I committed to 100 days. That's what I told myself. I'm like, I'm telling my family I'm going to do 50 days. I'm really going to do 100 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I went 75 days.
Okay.
And this was after I had taken several 30-day breaks. My dad passed away in May of 2014. I did a whole 30 in July of 2014, because even then it's like, I'm drinking too much. I'm eating too much. I'm not coping with grief in a way that's healthy. And so I'd done several whole 30. So had these 30-day breaks, but that was like a longer 75-day break in 2017. And then, I went back thinking, I don't know exactly what I thought. I thought that I might be healed. I thought that I might be able to control it. And every time I went back to alcohol, it always ended up the same, because alcohol doesn't change.
Sure.
My relationship with alcohol never got better than it was the moment I recognized it was no longer serving me. It only got worse. But God, did I try to hang on to alcohol and keep it in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to remember the timeline of my significant breaks. I think anything over 3 months to me is a significant break. So in 2020, that was when we were all home and in lockdown. And I live in Oregon, and we were especially locked down compared to the rest of the country. And I started buying wine by the box. And we have a refrigerator in our garage, and I would keep my boxed wine down there. And it started out at 5:00. I'd go down and fill my glass, and it was getting earlier and earlier the longer we were in lockdown, to the point that it was 2:00 and I was going down there and, just huge pours. I thought that a box was 3 bottles. I think it was 4, something. I had it off by a bottle, and I'm like, holy shit, I'm drinking a lot of wine right now. And that's when I decided to do the path through this naked mind. And I was really familiar with this naked mind, Annie Grace. She's really a thought leader in this space. She wrote Control Alcohol. I read that book 2 times. I listened to it on audiobook. She has a podcast she does. She has a free alcohol experiment. I did the live alcohol experiment twice in January, which is like a 30-day, there's daily coaching, all of that. So I decided I was going to pay and do this year-long program through this naked mind. And I met some amazing people. We're still friends today. We're still on a text string. I stuck with that program for 4 months. I didn't drink. I thought I was healed, thought I was, totally done with alcohol. And then whenever things started opening up and we made our re-entry to society, I wasn't prepared for that, to be around people, for the socialization. It was easy to do at home with my family. But once we started going out and social gatherings, and part of it was really celebratory too. I mean, there's always an excuse to drink, but really a celebration. Things are opening back up. Oh, we're not going to have to wear masks the rest of our lives, all those things.
Yeah.
That's when, I started drinking again.
Okay.
And I think once there's that awareness there that there's an issue with alcohol, I really could never drink with just disregard and abandonment. It was always in the back of my mind. How much am I going to drink? How am I going to not get drunk? Am I going to drink tonight? How much am I going to drink? I wrote about this. Do I have enough alcohol? Do I have too much alcohol? Those thoughts just consumed me.
Yeah.
I didn't want to get drunk in front of my kids, but I didn't want to give up alcohol. And it was just such, I was just at such war within myself.
Okay.
And so then that was in 2020, started drinking again in January 2021. Had some more breaks in between. In September 2022, I joined the Path again. The Path had evolved from a year-long program to a 90-day program. That's where I met Shannon at Mommy Does Not Need Wine, who's been really pivotal in my journey. Her friendship has meant the world to me, and we've stayed in communication. And I say she graduated and stayed sober. I dropped out. I didn't drop out. I finished the program, but I started drinking again. This is just ridiculous, right?
Yeah. It's had a lot of start stops. Yeah.
It's so crazy to hear me tell this story of how many starts and stops there were. If I heard somebody else saying what I'm saying, you're like, God, how could you not figure that out? How could you not figure out it was never going to, the relationship with alcohol was never going to change?
So what brought you to the actual stop? How do you know
I couldn't do it anymore? I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
I realized it was never going to get better. It was only going to get worse. And the more I tried to control it, the more alcohol controlled me, because it was all in my head. I was thinking about it nonstop. If I wasn't thinking about when I was going to drink, I was thinking about when I was going to quit drinking and stop drinking. And
yeah, so let's just pause for a second. There's so much good that you said. Why do we go to it in the first place? Everybody's different, but coping is such a big, you used it to cope with grief, or to cope with, people use it for social anxiety or depression, or not only thinking that it's the solution when in fact it becomes the problem. And just how the mental exhaustion of trying to figure that out and control it and enjoy it at the same time, which is literally impossible. And then what that brings us to, and I hope you speak to this later on, is to the absolute freedom when we decide to put it down for good. And so you really articulated that really well. So like 21.
Yeah. So and then
COVID.
Did the 3-month program in 2022. I was following Shannon because she and I were friends, and she had this sober Instagram account. And I was really appalled by some of the things she shared, like her going back to her vulnerability and what she shared. And I remember reaching out to her, and I asked, do your real life friends follow you? Do they know? Do they see what you're posting? And she was just like, they might, or they might not. They don't say a whole lot, but she's like, I don't really care. Like, it's not about them. This was about her and her journey and her relationship with her family and her daughters and all of that. And I really admired that. And I really related to her story through her posts. And she was really instrumental in helping me believe that in the possibility of a sober life. And I think that I want everybody to believe in the possibility of a sober life, and that a sober life is better than struggling every day and trying to make alcohol fit into your life.
Yes.
And so in 2023, I found a faster way, which is this at-home workout, fat loss nutrition, blah, blah, blah. And it's really what I needed, my perimenopausal body at the time needed. And love these workouts. I got laid off in June of last year. I think I found out in May of my communications job that I had had for 8 years and I loved. And I was trying to figure out what next steps were. Mm-hmm. Love this program, got certified as a fat loss and nutrition coach through this program. It was always in the back of my head, I have to get sober. I have to quit drinking. And this was really the first program I've done that discourages alcohol.
Okay.
Yeah. It says like alcohol should really not be a part of your health journey, mm-hmm. But if you drink, here's how you count macros. But it's a piece of it, like education around alcohol and why it's not good, especially for midlife fat loss efforts. And so that resonated with me. So I decided I was going to be certified to be a fat loss, weight loss, nutrition coach for midlife, sober and sober curious women. That was going to be my niche because they say, you need a niche. There's all these coaches out there and, a dime a dozen. Some are really, really great. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of us out there. And so what's your niche? And so I'm like, my niche is going to be sober and sober curious women. So I called Shannon. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think? She's like, go for it. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I'll support you however I can. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, I'm going to start an Instagram account. I started this Instagram account, like the name of it, the whole platform. I was following people before I was even sober. Yeah. And I started it a week into my sobriety. And what I found was the sober content was resonating with people. I was having trouble with working out and doing video workouts and all of that. And so I stuck with the sober content. And here I am almost a year later. It's like I put it out there like I believed it before I actually believed it. Uh-huh. And it provided a layer of accountability that I can't let these people down. They want me to be sober. They're relying on my content. But it really has been. It's helped me way more than it's helped other people, I think. And now I'm the one that shares all the people are so kind when I'm like, oh, thank my cringy content. They're like, it's not cringy, it's helpful. But I do put a lot of vulnerable details out there. And now I'm doing it. And it's been so freeing in so many ways. Not only sharing my story, but giving up alcohol. And it's just, I can't believe how much my life has changed in less than a year.
Let's take a moment to hear a recovery story from one of my sponsors. At the age of 25, recently married and a new father, Jack found himself in a Texas rehab facility detoxing. After 10 years of addiction, he was finally able to admit that it was time to get help. Not only did SoberLink allow him to be accountable and track his sobriety, SoberLink allowed Jack to prove to himself and others that he could make the change he had always hoped for. SoberLink is the portable sobriety tracker, taking the recovery world by storm. It has built-in facial recognition, sensors that detect cheating, and instant results sent to contacts. It's the #1 accountability tool for keeping yourself honest and rebuilding trust. Visit www.soberlink.com/sober-living and check out the show notes to click the link and receive $50 off your device today. Now back to our guest. Perfectly said, the freedom, the freeing part, it's like when you put something out there and people don't run away, but they run toward you, it gives you like evidence that, hey, this is okay. Because I think that's one of the hardest things for people. I know it is for me to openly speak about your life and the hard parts, the parts that you have behind closed doors. And, that's the part that people want to hear, because that's the part that we need to all feel like, wow, we're all just human. Like since I launched this podcast, like I can't walk into, there's no room I'll walk into where I know that every single person in that room has had something significant happen in their life that has been extremely difficult. I just can look at people more like they're human, like everybody is. And with alcohol, there's such a stigma around it. Can you speak to that a little bit on like diminishing the stigma? Because you talk about normalizing sobriety,
Right.
right? I mean, it's common. I think it's way more common than we think.
For sure. For sure. I I think it's important to know that everyone is struggling with something.
Yes.
And just because alcohol isn't their thing doesn't mean they don't have a thing.
Right.
We all have things. So knowing that in general is helpful to me in sharing my story. Because even if people are judgmental, and of course, for every 100 nice comments I get, I might get one rude comment, maybe not even that many. But I go back to my only response to them is, I'm glad alcohol isn't your thing, but I guarantee you have a thing. Have a nice day.
Right.
Because we're all battling something.
Sure.
And society makes us feel like if we struggle with alcohol, that's our fault. When in truth, alcohol is an addictive substance. Our struggling with alcohol is not our fault, but it is our responsibility.
Sure.
And I think just knowing that and knowing how many women come into my DMs with so much shame and so much guilt and telling me they're the worst mother and telling me I had someone yesterday who I did a post around midlife women and drinking and feeling alone and struggling with alcohol. And she came into my DMs and said that she was commenting there because she said, I don't want people to know I'm sober curious, as if that was embarrassing in some regard. And I just, I told her there's no shame in being sober curious. Alcohol is garbage. It's destructive to our health and our well-being and our mental and emotional wellness. And there's just no shame in choosing not to drink alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible how there is so much shame, but there shouldn't be. So I think what you're doing is breaking that in a way, but breaking free of that. Not just you, but you're helping others do that too, because they're like, wow, look what she's saying out loud. So how did your account take off? Like, when did you know that, wow, this is really something that's resonating with women all around the world, and I'm going to continue doing it because it's not only helping them, but it's helping me.
I think I had thought in my mind, if I was able to help one person, convince one person that sobriety was a better and easier way of life, it would be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a lot more than one person. And it's the comments that I get on a daily basis. And that's really why I keep going and keep sharing, because it's a lot of work. I don't get paid for it. There's no glory around having an Instagram account. And I'm not looking to monetize it, because people just need a free resource. They need to, they just need relatability. They need support. And my husband's like, what are you doing with this account? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't. But I tell him, I'm like, this is like my therapy. This is my accountability. I feel like it's a ministry at this point. Yeah. And, I told you prior to this conversation that I really felt called to do this, and I've never felt called to do anything. It was through the faster way, like be a faster way coach, target sober and sober curious women, like specifically because, there's a whole nother conversation around midlife weight gain and health and all of that and how detrimental alcohol is. So it just seemed to go hand in hand. And then I was like, oh my gosh, it's kind of like the bait and hook, like talk about your faster, but then it's like, all I do is talk about my sober piece. But like I said, it just feels like a ministry. And, but I get so much back too. And, there's a handful of women who didn't think they could ever get sober that I'm in regular contact with. And it just brings me such joy. And my motto is drinking is not an option. Mm-hmm. And anytime somebody DMs me and says that, I just keep replaying drinking is not an option over and over in my head, or your words resonated with me, or I remember drinking is not an option. It's like, I'm making a small difference. If I have any impact in someone's decision to consider a sober life, then this is all worth it.
So I think, yeah, that's great. And I agree with you. I think you're doing an incredible service almost, but it's also like what you had said, it's helping you. It's like almost like therapy. It's like,
yeah.
So what would you, I think one of the things that caught me, like drew me to your account was I was like, wow, she's speaking to moms, and it's like, I think that is in itself of like moms of elementary kids. It's a busy season. And, they talk about mommy wine culture and all this other things that I didn't really experience, but I've heard about. And that really drew me because I thought, wow, once again, she's putting the shame out of that. She's just stepping out into that. So what would you talk about how your home has changed since you decided to do this and to be alcohol free? Like, how has that affected your family, and you as a mom, or your functioning, or you as a member of, the community or whatever? Like, what are the benefits that you've experienced by choosing this lifestyle?
I think there was a significant chunk of time in which my kids didn't trust me because they didn't know which version of me was going to show up. And my oldest son at one time had said, "You're a really good mom in the day, just not at night." And I mean, I will never forget that. I will never forget those words. Those words alone should have caused me to stop drinking then, in that moment. But they didn't.
Right.
I kept thinking I could control it, that I wouldn't get drunk in front of him anymore. And so I think letting go of alcohol enabled me to have self-trust, to trust myself. I don't know on this journey that I've ever been this confident, and I'm not going to drink regardless of what comes my way. Drinking is not an option. And then in turn, my boys trust me. And when I have these conversations, these hard conversations around their recreational use of drugs, and I say drugs in general, and I include alcohol in that because alcohol is definitely a drug, mm-hmm. Then it comes with a lot more weight when I'm not drinking than if I were drinking. And I've talked very openly about my struggle with alcohol. I talk about us having addictive tendencies because this has been passed down generationally. I talk about drugs, their impact on mental health. And it's made everything easier in so many ways. I feel better. I'm more present. I'm a better mom. I took my twins to a quinceañera party on Saturday night. And it was the first time that I said, "I'm going to go to the bar and get a drink. I'll be back." And that was the first time they didn't ask, "Are you going to get alcohol?" Because they know I'm not at this point. But I think it's taken this long because of all the other stints I had done, like longer stints. I think they weren't sure, like, is it going to stick this time? Is it not going to?
Yeah.
Even at, I think I was almost 8 months sober, and I was hosting, I think I was hosting Bunko, something. And I was serving wine, and I was getting out the wine. We have this wine cellar. People are like, why don't you just get rid of it? I'm like, I know, I need to. My husband has since boxed it all up, and now it's sitting in our living room, and I need to figure out what I'm going to do with all of this wine. But I was getting all this stuff ready, and my son was like, are people going to be partying tonight? And I'm like, well, some probably. And then he's like, are you going to be partying tonight? And, I'm like, no, not today, not today.
Okay.
But that was even 8 months. So it's, I think finally now they know, like, I'm serious about this. They know all about my Instagram account. My 17-year-old is just, loves, like, how many followers do you have? Like, he designs clothes. He's like, do you want me to create some merch? Like, oh my God, it's killing me.
Right?
Yeah, I know. It's so funny. They're so funny. But it's made everything easier and better and brighter. And I don't wake up every day just laden with shame and guilt and wondering if, it was always, I'm not going to drink tonight. Today's the day. I'm not going to drink tonight. And then I listened to the Rachel Hart podcast on the way home from dropping my kids off from school. And then by 2:00, I was rationalizing a glass of wine just tonight. Tonight. I'll start tomorrow. By 5:00, I was opening a bottle every single day. It never changed. It was the same thing day in, day out.
Yeah. You said something really important. It's like when you believed in yourself, everyone else started to as well. And I think that's so true. I think when people respect their choices, their sobriety, there's a certain, if I respect mine, everyone else is going to too. And also, there's that saying, the ones closest to us are the last ones to see us change or right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's true, if you look at family, because I guess they have the closest eye as to when we were, like I think of my mom or dad. It was just like a convincing, like, no, listen, it's really okay. And then once I truly, truly believed that within my own heart, I knew I didn't have to say that to them any longer, And that was a turning point, because it meant that I took hold of it. I wasn't doing it for anything or anybody else, but I was doing it because I knew I was completely done. So yeah, that's really important and powerful. And I love that your children know about your account and, because this is like, it's the way of the future, right? And so, and their involvement and their excitement for it, is really great. It's like, it's a support, and your friends that you met along the way who have been a support to you, just as you're supporting those women in your DMs that come in privately or otherwise, to share their hearts and about their struggles or their questions. So it's very powerful.
Thank you.
So what else, what do you see in your future with this? Well, I know your alcohol-free journey is, you're steadfast, your line, drinking is not an option. It's so important to have those one-liners that somebody can just grab and mean.
Yeah, I think I would love to write a book at some point. I joked I was in one of the captions that my book is going to be called Drinking is Not an Option.
Yes, right?
I don't know what it's going to be called. I was a writer spent my professional career in public relations. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote all the time. I've written from the time as early as I can remember. I wrote for my high school newspaper, my college newspaper, my entire professional career. And so this is really, my account's really an extension of that. I get to write and I get to tell stories. And I think that is another part of the relatability is I'm a storyteller. So that comes naturally for me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know what my book would be about, but it's a way for when my husband's like, what are you going to do with this? Like, I might write a book. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know what's next.
Mm-hmm.
And, the growth has been incredible. Having said that, I want to be able to give everyone who reaches out proper time and attention.
Sure.
And so it's really figuring out how to manage that in a way that I can be present for my family and still minister to these people who reach out to me. But I don't know what it looks like. My husband and I talk about it a lot.
Yeah. So if anyone's listening right now and they are struggling, what would be like 3 things that you would tell them that is important as far as stepping into this lifestyle?
There's 100 things that are important. It's going to be hard to narrow it down to 3. I think that it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it. We want instant gratification, and we live in a society where that's largely possible in many aspects of our lives. I was going to my event Saturday night. I needed mascara and I needed some tape things to help keep my dress up. So I went to Amazon and it was delivered between 2 and 5 p.m. that day. Like, that's the society we live in. And so we want things to be immediately better, immediately fixed. And this is a journey. This is a process. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs. So just know it's not easy, but it's worth it. And I would say a slip isn't failure. It's part of the process. And if anyone is a testament to that, it's me, because of all the times I slipped and fell and thought I was failing, and it wasn't failing. It was actually part of the work. You don't fail unless you quit trying. And I say sobriety it doesn't have to be all or nothing in the beginning as you're figuring things out, because every day we choose not to drink, our bodies rejoice. Mm-hmm. And lastly, I would say whenever you're ready to be done, decide drinking is not an option. And you can do anything but drink. You can eat a cake. You can go to bed at 8:00. You can take a bath at 2 p.m. You can go for a walk. You can go to a movie by yourself. You can go to the park with your kids. You can take your dog to the dog park. Anything that gets you out of that feeling like you need a drink, anything but drink. So regardless of what comes your way, drinking is not an option. So how are you going to deal with it? How are you going to cope? It's not not with alcohol.
Love it. All good answers. Absolutely helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So where can people find you during the week?
Right. The only place I am is on Instagram at macros in mocktails. So macros, letter N, mocktails.
Thank you for tuning into the Sober Living Stories podcast. If you have been inspired, consider subscribing and sharing with anyone who could use hope in their lives. Remember to stay tuned for more inspiring stories in the episodes to come. To view our featured author of the month or to become a guest yourself, visit www.jessicastipanovic.com.